Hi, everyone. Welcome to the First and Last Word Poetry Series. And tonight we have three readers, Denise Bergman, Ed Meek, and Lainie Senechal. I'll introduce you now to Harris, who will introduce the readers. So Harris.
Thank you, Gloria. And our first reader, Denise Bergman, who's the author of 5 poetry collections, including The Shape of the Keyhole, 2021, 3 Hands None, A Woman in Pieces, A Woman in Pieces Crossed the Sea, The Telling, and Seeing Annie Sullivan, all book-length poems. She edited City River Voices, an anthology of urban poetry. Please welcome Denise Bergman.
Thank you, Harris, and thank you, Gloria, and I'm delighted to be here. I'm going to read from The Shape of the Keyhole, which was published this year, and then I'm going to read 2 short new poems after that. The Shape of the Keyhole is a book-length poem about a woman in 1650 in Cambridge who was falsely accused and hanged for killing her friend's child, whom she had played with the day before. The book takes place across 1 week, beginning with the shock of her arrest and ending with her hanging. And there are 4 sections: the arrest, the so-called trial, the days in which she awaits her execution, days of, I could imagine, massive confusion and fear, and the day of her execution. The one in the constable's robe taps knuckles on her door, fingers fisted white around bone, wrist the knocker hinge, taps his knuckles. She empties the wash bucket, walks round to the front, sees the back of the man. Yes? Bucket clanks, rolls to a rock, stops. A lit fuse, his knuckle fist. No warning, the knock not a warning, the knock a command, a sentence. Read it forward, in reverse. Subject, verb, ignite, verb, subject. The end starts here. Footnote. Indecipherable command, the knock, she doesn't know the end encoded in the beginning. Code breakers, deep asleep, even awake, if ever awake, which key? The shape of the keyhole is the shape of the key. Autopsy, autopsia, and see for oneself. Blue, the boy's lips, fingers, toes, ears, nose. The cold had stuck in the red gum, they said. The red gum come out upon him. Felled by ignorance, shrunken by pride, the examiners stopped looking for why, blamed her as their disguise. She had held tight her friend's shoulders before the baby's head crowned, lifted the placenta from the midwife's hands, suggested his name. Who is she? Who is she not, that they will hoist her before, as she herself would say, double checking? Who, that no one saddles a horse, gallops to the dead boy's mother, asks. Fear awakens fear. Slipping on a crisp of ice, stepping on a fiddlehead, falling off the roof, standing too tall, appearing too upright, loving, letting loose, making mistakes unbeknownst to her, stumbling on the street. Fear of no fear, fear of a dozen fears, eggs in a pyramid, forgetting to cross your fingers, being visible, invisible, wrong place, too late, too early, on time. From section 2, the trial. Outside the door, unsure, women pace circles. Fresh washed bonnets, button-up boots, palms on children's heads, over children's mouths, shoving to hear the last word first, pacing circles, ovals, spirals, spiraling, shoving through their fear. Bobbleheads high, jurymen proud to be picked know what they are told they know, decide decisive decisions. No need to listen. Listen to what? Nothing can be said. No one says the nothing. Butcher in the jury box twists to escape her eyes. Baker in the front row spits a gargled wad. Preacher shoots her with his trigger finger, pop with his tongue. Farmer steps out the door, signals his wife to horse up the wagon, go home, milk the cows. Constable boasts his call. Blacksmith's boy sneaks up and slaps her. Fear, like smokehouse fire, fills her loins. From section 3, the waiting time. She begs notice, begs not to be noticed. Keep away. Step so close the fear in her breath miss your face. Scintillates. Hubbub, thrill, excitement, dizzy, spinning, chasing. Tag, you're it. But you're not it, not her. She's too shocked to be shamed, too shamed to be in shock. She is concentric center and its widest ring, ripples cause and reverberation. The thrown stones plunk, swallowed by silence. She is not the first centricity, first to be hanged, first innocence, not the last. Her husband thinks, says to no one, I can stand with her, but he can't. His steps will trace back to him. He is losing thought. His voice has lost propulsion. He squints at her body. Shadow afar is substance. Substance close up is shadow. Who comes close stays away. Husband, tilling the winter-hard ground, reconsiders walking towards her. She says, if you stand behind me, you're next in line. Surrounding moment is momentum, spiraling down a funnel spout, rushing to the river where a woman is stolen by current, to the courthouse where one word ends a life. In momentum is moment, one link in a long chain, is moments, plucked, scrambled one at a time. Inside moment, momentum agitates to be unleashed. Soon her head will squeeze through the noose, loop, rope, twisted by law a uniform number of times. Excuse me. Hemp needles will welt her cheek, more red than shame, more red than terror. Her jaw a bleeding crosshatch, ears pinned back, chin aligned in its assigned position on the precipice. from the last section, the hanging. Faces beam, string her up eyes, drip snot noses, chapped grin lips, hang her high. Rope twisted 7 times, knotted 12, length to spare. A tom squawks in the distance, hens defy the fence. A man who didn't come early took some minutes to wrangle his fowl. A girl whispers to her cousin, I know her. The minister hallelujahs, pounds his little book, thud, thud, leather to palm. A woman turns beet red as if choking. If I were there, would I be there? She straightens her skirt. Hill, sky framed in elm branches, 360-degree stage, a place. A hill, a view, a stage, spectators, actors. Whose eyes are on her? Who is aghast? For whom is this a party? She looks. If I were there, would I be there? If I were there, would I catch her eye? Tugged, pulled up the midday hill, handled, her bootlaces peck the grass. Husband says to himself, what about me, dragging my dislodged heart too by a rope? The crowd parts, snaps fingers, get out of here, get. Only last week, leaning on the fence, chuckling. That one's twice told story, this one's lame joke. And at the long table, the minister handed him the knife to slice the bread. She stumbles, sees him, confused in the mutilated landscape. She rubs her disbelieving eyes. Epilogue. A Mrs. in the record of convictions. First name simply Mrs. The only no first name listed. In the column found guilty, found guilty. In a hasty quote unquote trial, 2 in the record, no recorded day or month, even the year a question. And I have 2 new poems to read. This one was just published in About Place Journal, and it's called Radio Garden. And Radio Garden is a website where you can tune into radio stations around the world. And they're lit up with little green dots, and you use the cursor to spin the world. It's really quite a glorious thing to do. Radio Garden. Tiny emeralds dot the borderless world. Each radio signal a lure, immediate connection. No where too far. Amman, Derry, Ramallah, Lisbon, Buenos Aires, Dallas, Nome. Up to the minute news, say so, song. Reykjavik, Mumbai, hillside village, desert town. Green flickers from the tallest tower on a hill, in a field, offshore, on the roof. New York, Arl, Gulu, AM, FM screaming the pain, impounding the cry, where true boundaries splinter, cross, merge, overlap. Here, barbed wire stitches dissolve. I know geography. Waste no time finding Nairobi, Xi'an, Gander's green pinholes on the tight-knit map. Long after he died, I discovered a folded photo in my uncle's red plaid hunting jacket pocket. I am 4 at the kitchen table, earmuffed in oversized headphones, concentrating, reaching into shortwave static for the imagined place where a real voice will arch its arrow purposefully into the air. My uncle tuning the dials and me nodding yes or no until the point lands. And this poem is called Puzzle Map. It was Mousetrap that toppled off the big box store's top shelf, landed on my mother's head and knocked her out. Clerks, manager, EMTs, until she could spit out Reagan was president. But it was the 14 by 18 puzzle of the United States she was after. A wholesome flat package, pieces in place to start with, roomy 2-inch border, eagle in the corner, and each state's outline beveled in the knotted, all flimsy base. Made a kind of sense, her country for her grandson to hold on his lap, turn upside down, shake if he pressed the states down tight. Mousetrap's giddy chaos they had mastered together, both drawn to games that appear in a small way to push a limit. Beaver dams of pickup sticks, towering stack attack minarets, pretending their skill were, oh, just random success. The US, though, a different skill, a puzzle yet not a puzzle. 50 rigid, simply illustrated facts. Cactus, lobster, cowboy hat, canaveral rocket, bison, buffalo, peanut. On the speckled linoleum store aisle, she came to, embarrassed and apologetic the way women blame ourselves for what falls on us from high and dangerous piles. The store gave her the puzzle, sent her a decent-sized check. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Denise. Let's have another round of applause for Denise Bergman. Next up is Ed Meek. Ed has had poems in the Sun, the Baltimore Review, the Paris Review, and one of his poems is featured on the Mayor's Poetry exhibit this year in City Hall. And of course, he's been published in many other journals as well. His new book is entitled High Tide. Please let's welcome Ed Meek.
Thank you, Gloria and Harris, for pulling this together. I really enjoyed that, Denise. Did you notice that one of her lines was the first and last word? It's appropriate for the first and last word series. I also like the line, if you stand behind me, you're next in line. Nice feeling of menace there. Okay, so I'm going to read some poems from High Tide, my new book, which is kind of about high tide as a time of plenty and also as a time of threat. And I'll read a few new poems. And I'm going to start off with a poem called Bambino Caravan, which was about, during the pandemic, kind of every morning, there would be about a dozen kids, little kids from Davis Square Kindercare, all dressed in little yellow shirts, tied together by rope and led by these Spanish-speaking women. And they were kind of a happy caravan going by in the morning. Bambino Caravan. Spring mornings and late afternoons, the daycare children sprung from Davis Square kindercare, toddle past my condo in a lively circus caravan, led by their trainers, African-American and Latina queens, surrogate mother and nanny nurse teachers who push 6-seat carriages, pull octo-bench carts, and herd a baker's dozen yellow-vested unbinary boys and girls linked by a walking rope like dwarf horses or baby elephants, transmogrified into a giant caterpillar migrating through our urban hood. Meanwhile, the queens tour guide the names of the sites: perros y gatos, cherry trees and tulips, robins y adias. Vamos, niños, they call. Let's go, bambinos. And this is a poem called Anthropocene. We're kind of in charge now, for good or ill. And this is partly based on a couple of different things. Seeing some turkeys down the Cape flying up into trees to roost for the night. And also, I was on a safari a couple of years ago with my wife, and so we're watching these, see these leopards in the trees, and we're watching, and there were some lions around, and the guide told us that, the lions ruled the area. And so I said, well, why don't the lions climb up the tree and eat the leopard? And he said, well, the lions are so big, they're still cats. They can climb up the tree, but they can't get back down. So Anthropocene. The turkeys like to sleep in the trees, though it isn't easy for them to get to bed. They crane their waffled necks, trot a few ungainly steps, and lift their plump bodies off the earth to fly up and roost on a branch for the night, away from insatiable coyotes and men. They seek the safety of trees like leopards escaping lions. Lions can climb up and eat the leopard, our safari guide tells us, but they can't get back down. We are not the turkeys in this poem. We are the lions, and we have climbed up the tree and eaten the leopard. This is another poem kind of related, called Climate Change. And this is like partly based on a real experience where we had this, my wife and I had this cat called Isis, and one time she used to climb out on the fire escape, and she caught a bird and brought it in her mouth and presented the bird to us. And the birds have this trick where they can go into stun. And so it seems as if they're not alive. So climate change. You woke me up to talk again about the need to move when our cat, Isis, proud as a peacock, presented us with a purple finch she must have caught outside the window of our cottage on the coast. She leapt onto the bed and dropped her gift between the white silk sheets. The bird was as stiff as a homeless drunk in winter. Isis returned to her perch on the ledge and purred with the satisfaction of a job well done, while the finch, to our delight, popped up to its feet, took to the air, and flew out the window. Was it stunned or playing possum, I wondered. We have to talk, you said, as I rolled back over feigning sleep. Okay, and this is a kind of an escape poem that I wrote during the pandemic called How to Skip Stones. Do you remember keeping your eyes open for flat oval rocks to pocket on walks to the pond? Saving the best for last, you'd lean to one side and flick your wrist, flinging the stones just off the water. It isn't easy to defy gravity and make a stone skip like a tern and skim weightless, soaring without wings, touching down like a plane while you count until it sinks and heads to rest anonymous on the bottom. Maybe that's what we're after as we try to stay afloat, skimming on the surface, defying the odds for the fleeting feeling of flight. And this is a poem called Sea Star. So we had this starfish that we picked up on the beach at home, and I was looking at it one day, and so I decided to look up starfish. And so starfishes are not fish. They're, I think they're called echinoderms. They're related to the same family as sea urchins. And so their actual name is sea star. You may have had an inkling a starfish isn't a fish at all, but a sea star, a fallen angel, asteroidia. Does it make you happy or sad to know it doesn't have a heart or a brain, a thought or a care in the world? Still, this beautiful creature hungers like the rest of us and searches with the eyes at the end of its arms for shellfish and coral to devour with the mouth at the center of its body. Those tiny stems beneath the arms are legs. They keep it on the move like the stars above. This is a poem about swimming. We used to have a place down the Cape, which we recently sold. So I used to go swimming a lot in kettle ponds. And I was just thinking about how strange it is to swim backwards. So this is called Looking Back. The Australian crawl isn't a crawl at all, but the quickest way to swim from here to there, submersing yourself in the water, turning your head to catch some air and admire the scenery passing by. But should you tire and need a break, you might just flip onto your back and relax. Reach behind and pull the water past your body to swim with a view of the sky and what you've left behind, making it easier to breathe, but creating a sense of uncertainty about where exactly you're headed and what you really believe. And I'm going to read a couple of poems about my parents, who are no longer with us. This one's called Idling. He was good with his hands. My father could fix a leaky faucet or a squeaky hinge. He'd take on projects whenever he'd visit. He always brought his tools in the trunk of his car. He liked to keep them handy in case the dishwasher refused to start, or the wires crossed in a lamp, or a screen slider slid off the track. He tried to teach me how to wield a wrench, and I was happy to crawl beneath a car to replace the shoes, or hover over an engine and with his guiding hand adjust the idle. But my mind was always elsewhere, thinking of Holden's Phonies, or Nick's River, or Emily's Eternity, and the way words sounded when you put them together and turned them over in your mind. And this one is called For My Mother. She could be fun with the whimsicality of a leaf held aloft by wind, buoyant as a boat, happily rudderless, drifting beneath a sunny sky. She loved a sunny sky and a sunny disposition, thought them prerequisites for a successful life, which may be why she was depressed, disapproving of the serial divorces of my sisters and the estranged, overly sensitive son who ran away to the Maine woods and never came back. But I see I've tacked off course. I wanted to give praise to her smile, its sunny warmth, and the effort it took to dawn daily. no matter which way the wind blew. I'm going to read two more poems. This is another family poem about my extended family, my uncles and grandfather. It's called Crown Royal. I'm Irish, so there's quite a bit of drinking in the extended family. My father didn't drink because his father and his brothers drank too much. My grandfather's weakness, Crown Royal, cloaked in a blue velvet pouch, cost what he made in a day fixing the cars of the residents of Milton. He loved to sing the Irish songs when he was soused. But when my dad took the bottle away from his brother Bobby after Easter dinner, Bobby sucker punched him. I was 11, ready to kill, but my dad, an ex-Marine, held back, gathered my mother, my siblings, and me, and retreated home as his eye swelled and colored. The youngest, Donnie, turned to booze when Bobby ran the gas station into the ground. He took cash from the till to play the horses. He drank when they won, and he drank when they lost. Of course, he lost much more than he won. One more poem. This one is set in Somerville. And it's kind of about this crossing guard, which was this little old guy who lived a couple of doors down from me. And it has two parts. One, you can't miss the crossing guard, that luminescent lemon drop at the corner each day. He waits with the patience of Job, ready to perform his sacred duty. With hands as old as vines twisted by time, he holds the divine red lollipop, its simple command in 4 black letters. When he raises his arm, bikes, cars, and trucks like well-trained soldiers grind to a halt as he ferries the children across the dangerous divide. 2, he'll be there at the river to help us on board, hold the ferry steady when the wind picks up or the currents are strong. Are you ready? He'll ask, smiling. The last words we'll remember as we embark and watch the shore fade away before we turn to face the wind and whatever lies ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed Meek. And our third featured poet tonight is Lainie Senechal. Lainie Senechal is an established watercolorist and a former poet laureate of Amesbury, Mass, and current poet in residence of the Mass Audubon's Joppa Flats Education Center. She is read and featured at many venues throughout New England. Her poetry has appeared in journals and anthologies, including the Aurorian, City of Poets, Ibbison Street, Spare Change, and many others. She co-authored 2 volumes of poetry, and her most recent individual chapbook is Vocabulary of Awakening. Please welcome Lainie Senechal.
Thank you, Harris. Thank you, Gloria and Harris, for inviting me tonight. And thank you, Denise and Ed. I really enjoyed listening to your poetry, and it's a delight to read with you. I'm going to start with this poem that I wrote it after reading the short newspaper article. It was Plantings in the Medium of Highway 101 Snarls Traffic. It interested me because my sister lived near Highway 101 in Epping, New Hampshire, and was a gardener. She was always complaining about the traffic. The sirens of Route 101. In between eastbound and westbound, we flourish. As traffic whizzes by, we take life in slow motion, imperceptibly follow the sun across the late summer sky, festooned with brilliant petals that surround our dark hearts where seeds slowly ripen. We entice the bees, then lure chickadees and finches with our bounty. However, here on Highway 101, drivers, mesmerized by our seductive beauty, abandon their commutes to commune with blossoms, as if some old song, barely remembered, has called them home again. The second poem is also about nature interrupting human activity, again in silence. This poem is titled Hummingbird in the Whittier Home Garden. Ruby-throated hummingbird appears suddenly amongst bright ruby-colored blossoms in Whittier's August garden during the annual reading, darts swiftly from flowerlet to flowerlet, thrusts its bill down each tiny tube. Listeners become observers. Words float unheard into warm summer air. Focus now on blurred wings of tiny visitor, intent on gathering sustenance, who takes no notice of silent admirers and disappears suddenly to seek nectar from other flowers. For poetry provides no purpose in its petite world. This next poem I recently went back to and revised a little. It has to do with the touring the Great Marsh, which the Great Marsh extends along the whole North Shore and up here into Plum Island near where I live. This is called Touring the Great Marsh, and this tour started in Essex. There's one word, Spartina is a scientific word for marsh grass. The tide had come in, flooding the path to the dock. Rickety boards were laid to reach a different pier. When all was finally settled on the Essex tour boat, it commenced its voyage through the Great Marsh. Spartina tops created a carpet of green on either side of the estuary, where a few great egrets slowly strutted along. The vessel reached Hog Island and began a ride around its tall hill that rises above surrounding sea, accompanied by stories about its history and inhabitants. Castle on the hill destroyed and rebuilt, not by a siege, but by a woman's particular fancy. Movie sets constructed, then removed after the production silenced the motorboats and paid the clamors off. A house on another island, so egregious to others, builder and structure tossed out, relocating to Gloucester. The afternoon sun glints off the grasses of the Great Marsh that soaks up pollution so effectively. Local clams go directly from mud to market. The greenery stills the waves from storms, protects the land from harm. The boat heads for home base, chugging gradually along, avoiding the wake of speedboats. An afternoon to relax among the pristine beauty of this singular place. I originally abandoned that poem for a while because I had gone on that journey with my two grandchildren who were teenagers. They were totally bored, but I loved it. This next poem goes to a different place. I was scrolling through some scientific postings, and I came across this NASA posting in which you could listen to their recordings of the sun and planets, the sounds of these objects. I don't know how they did that, but anyhow, I wrote this poem briefly describing the sound of the sun and each of the planets. Sounds of the solar system. The sun is a steady vibration, a low and long note, a deep breath in and out, an endless pulsation. Mercury is a growl from a monster at the back of a cave, a howl from a hollow throat near the crackling fire. Venus is a large ringing bell, a protracted hum from some ancient temple gong. Earth is a fast flow, the swish of wind and water, the movement of waves or clouds soaring in the wind. Mars is a quiet hush, like a slight zephyr, a distant clanging with the sound of a large soft drum. Jupiter is the playing of forgotten music strummed on a two-stringed instrument, joined by steady chanting. Saturn is a loud scream, fighter jets zooming overhead, flying back and forth. Uranus is whooshing and sloshing, a wet sound heard as if underwater. Neptune is an almost silent wind, a faint breeze blowing through supple spring blossoms. Pluto is a waterfall landing on a gong, an organ played slowly beside a moving stream. These various voices form a cosmic choir, which fills the vast expanses of silent space. I'm going to read a couple poems about October. October is one of my favorite months. It's just so beautiful. I've written many poems, but I'll read these two. October's Last Love Song. The autumn sun sinks the color of leaves into the skin. The wind plucks sweet notes from golden branches and strums stalks of reeds whose shaggy heads sway to the sound. The melancholy romance of October's last song is carried on currents into the depths of blue and caught on ragged edges of behemoth clouds that travel to other places. I cannot remain here and I cannot depart. I am wound in tendrils of intense infatuation. Ogunquit in October. Moon rests on rolling waves, incoming breakers, ribbons of silver. Ocean sighs a long, deep sigh in respite between summer hurricanes and winter gales. Tidal river flows silently, carries scattered stars under the bridge, past a blue heron fishing in moonbeams. Music, dimmed by distant, drifts out of a bar. I almost remember days when life was a sweet, simple refrain that rose like the sea mews into the soft night air. This is a very recent poem because it has to do with an adventure Harris and I had last Saturday. We were invited to visit our friend Bill Falzatano at his lovely home in Gloucester. And this is a brief description of the afternoon, of course, for Bill. Last day of summer. The warm weather flowed into early autumn. A day on a sunny porch of a high hill overlooking the open sea beyond the rise. Nearby, a single monarch blithely bothers the blossoms of a late blooming bush. The clouds tell stories about the change to come, swirling across the sky in whirls and patterns painted in shades of gray. Now, however, a time to lounge lazily outdoors, dining on late corn and local ice cream, in good company on a pleasant afternoon, and to ignore the portent of the heavens, as if the pattern was stable and summer will never end. I'm going to end with this poem. This poem I wrote at the beginning of COVID-19. It's called Contemplating COVID-19. However, there's nothing about COVID-19 in the poem. It's actually contemplating mortality. When you reach a certain age, contemplating mortality happens more often. Things trigger it, COVID definitely. So I'll read the poem. Are these my last days? I harbor no complaints as I sit by the lake on an early spring evening. The sun has settled between silent gray clouds and sends a silver light onto the lake's still surface, creates a mosaic of bright and dark patterns along waves now brushed by soft breezes. I am home in the place of my birth, my familiar turf. In another dimension, family and friends may await, or have they always been here? I wonder, does time even exist? I have my doubts about this. In memory with my siblings splashing in the waters of Attitash, while my father strummed songs on the old wooden porch. Pleasant hours that exist within. If a different world is a destination, a departed friend found me in dreams with news that he saved a spot. No issues if the earth claims me, for we have always been close. I am not yet packing my bags, but have secured a few supplies. Thank you.
Thank you, Lainie. And can we have another round of applause for our readers? So now we come to the Q&A section of the reading, and I'm going to switch now to gallery view so I can see all of you. Okay, would someone like to start out? Yes, Karen, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you
Yeah.
are.
Yes.
Well, thanks everybody for a wonderful reading. I'm remembering Ed's swimming poem, and I'm remembering Lainie's Sounds of the Sun. What a wonderful concept. But my question is for Denise, and it is, how did you find Mrs.? And what drew you to her? I never heard of this person, and it's terrifying that it happened, and fascinating, such a horrible miscarriage of justice, and the poem fills the sense of menace and wrongness and puzzlement and all of that. But you must somehow have found her, or she found you in some way. And I'm just curious about how that happened.
Well, thank you for the question and for feeling the menace in the poem. A lot of years ago, I think it was 1998, I did a series of poems. I live in Cambridge, and I did a series of poems about places that had changed significantly. For example, East Cambridge, there was a slaughterhouse, and now it's a shopping mall. Significant changes. And in looking at those historical sites, I discovered that there was a woman named Mrs. Kendall, who, not related to Kendall Square, who was hanged. She was accused of bewitching a child to death in 1650. This was before the Salem witch trial, so it wasn't a witch hunt. And then years and years later, I guess it was about 5 years ago that I started writing this book. And perhaps I started writing it because of issues of equal justice, the political and capital punishment. But in doing the research for it, I discovered that there were a lot of executions, and there were books and books of executions in New England, but everyone had a name, whether it was a servant or whoever it was, there was a full name, and she was only listed as Mrs. Kendall. And that was another attraction meaning it got me angry. And so I dove into the book that way.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
Is there another question from somebody? Sarah, did you raise your hand?
No, I just wanted to say I really enjoyed the poems, all of them. Thank you.
Okay. Maybe I missed someone. Okay, Molly, go ahead.
I just am at the moment working on a new collection of poems, and I was just curious as to how the three people go about working on their poems, which is none of my business. But I'm just, because I'm busy working on mine, I'm just suddenly thinking, any interesting tricks or thoughts? And if you can't think of any, then just say, go away. That's fine.
No, I think it's a perfectly good question. Because I'm often writing nature poetry, I'm always gathering imagery in my head. I mean, you could write it down, but I don't. So I always have this group of images, and then something sort of arises from there, or something happens that connects to it. And so that's kind of my process.
I tend to write poems that fit into a theme. In other words, all of my books are book-length poems. And so I find myself over the years coming up with an idea and then gathering poems to fit that idea. And all of the poems, all of the books, and a lot of my interest is in looking at a small chunk of time, getting inside of it. In this case, it was a week. Gloria Červená Barva published The Telling, which is about something that happened over the course of a couple of months to someone. So I tend to write for a book more and more over time.
And Ed, did you want to respond?
Things or ideas or emotions that stick with me and have some crossover into interesting language, I would say, are things that I write about. But, so sometimes it's just something like that sea star poem that it's something I'm sort of puzzled about or looks interesting. Or it could be an idea that sticks with me, like idling with my father and the way he used to fix things and how different we were. And then, it's just something that a lot of times I'll go back to them and I don't actually know what they're about at first, but they sort of change and I discover what they're about as I go along and figure out how to bring them together.
Thank you. That's really interesting.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I thought of two questions, one for Ed and one for Denise. Ed, have you? I just wonder if you've written much about your family, because, those poems you read towards the end about the family gathering and about your mother, there was something very intense and wrenching about those. I mean, all the work is very lovely and lyrical and well spoken, but those had as an emotional. I just wonder if that's something you explore in your writing.
Yes. Yes, I have. But yeah, that's definitely, those are confessional poems, right? So they have, I think, an emotional drive in them. Yeah, thanks.
And then I want to ask Denise about, are you mostly inspired by historical narratives, or have you had other book length? Because that's pretty ambitious. That's to have a book length theme.
Right. I think it turns out that it is historical. The books that I have, one is about Annie Sullivan, who was Helen Keller's teacher. And what triggered it was when I discovered her shame about being poor. So that grew. And one is about the Statue of Liberty. And I asked the question I guess I'd been asking since childhood, because I lived in New Jersey. I grew up in Jersey City, so I saw the statue. We called it the Lady. And I would think, how can a symbol carry all of this weight? It's really just metal, And so that opened it up. So they tend to turn out to be, but historical. But it's not that I'm not a historian by I'm the opposite. Although could be more, it wouldn't hurt. Yeah.
And Lainie, I wanted to ask you, how do you how important is the science to the writing of the nature poetry? I'm curious about that, because I know you bring in things that are, scientific terms and stuff. I just wondered about that.
Yeah, well, my background is in science. That's what my degrees are in. That's what I taught for many years, biology and environmental science. So it's part of my life. It's part of how I see things. I don't think about it when I'm writing, I think I need to use this scientific term. It just is all combined. I've always been very focused on nature, and whether I'm doing something scientific, whether I'm painting or whether I'm writing, to me, it's all kind of all connected to the nature around me.
Okay, we have time for one more question before we end. Is there anyone else that would like to ask something?
I wanted to say, first of all, thank you all for being here and reading. They were all exquisite poems. I really enjoyed this evening, so thank you again for sharing your wonderful work. Lainie, you seem to be likened to me in the way of being connected to the sea, coast, New England. Mm-hmm. Is that a real influence on you personally and your work, as I assume?
Yeah, I was born in Amesbury, Mass, so growing up, and then lived in Beverly. Growing up, of course, we're very close to the coast here. Also, my master's degree is in marine biology. So I spent a lot of time near the coast, in the ocean, etc. So I have a deep connection to the oceans.
Thank you very much. I very much connected to that and connected to the sea as well. Thank you. Thank you for a wonderful answer.
Well, thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. And Lainie, I never knew that about you, so I learned something new. And so another round of applause for our readers, and then that will be it tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
And thank you, Harris and Gloria.
Thank you.
Thank you.